What if I told you that it's actually most people's workout routines that are destroying their bodies in the long term? All because they neglect the most crucial part of training. They prioritize strength and size with a direct approach while neglecting the single aspect that helps you truly build full body strength, but more importantly, the longevity that you need to become stronger for the rest of your life, instead of having to dial it back because of constant injuries, or even worse, thinking that it is old age that is holding them back, when in fact it was their training approach that utterly decimated their potential for true lifelong strength and fitness. Because under all that muscle and all that strength, they have never worked on the true foundation of fitness and becoming stronger. And today I'll be sharing with you the root cause of this weakness. Starting to work on this like a decade ago didn't just completely change my approach to training, but also permanently changed my body, made me stronger, faster, more mobile, more limber, and most importantly, almost completely injury-free for the past decade. And if you've been on this channel before, you probably know what I'm talking about, because today we'll get into spinal mobility and strength. The more fluidly you can move your spine, the more strength you can produce. And if you've ever seen a martial artist throw a kick or a punch, you know that it doesn't come from their arms, their shoulders, or even their legs. It comes from a rotation throughout the entire body. And in fact, there are only a handful of spinal functions you need to work on to completely change your body's potential for force production. You need to increase your range of motion when it comes to spinal flexion, the rounding of the back, which is intrinsically connected to core strength and abdominal strength. Work on spinal extension, bending backwards, which is intrinsically connected to back strength and shoulder strength, leaving us with rotational movement patterns that connect abdominal strength with back strength and directly impacts any sort of force production in your body. The less mobile and less supple your spine is, the weaker you will be compared to the potential of strength your body has. So let's just go through a handful of exercises that will save you from this weakness before it is too late. So as usual, we'll start with the easiest, lowest impact exercises first. So even if you are a beginner, you can jump right in. And we'll go through a progression. So if you are more advanced, oh boy, do I have some exercises for you. Cat-cow is by far the lowest impact, highest yield spinal extension and flexion exercise you can work on. Not only is it very beginner friendly because it barely requires any strength, but it teaches you how to coordinate and move your spine through the right pattern in the longest range of motion you can muster. Going through complete flexion, which is going to strengthen our anterior chain, specifically our abdominals, and full extension, which is going to strengthen our spinal musculature, specifically our lumbar spine. And what it does best, what most people tend to suffer from, and which is an absurd detriment to most people's quality of life and leads to an insane amount of injuries, going through this movement will teach you how to go from anterior to posterior pelvic tilt, which is this movement. A very short but crucial one, not only to advance when it comes to mobility. Heck, if you do strength training, if you do heavy squats and deadlift, not being able to do this will lead to injury. Moving us to one of my favorite spinal exercises, which is basically just taking our spine through an ever-increasing range of motion of lateral flexion. Not only does this exercise feel absolutely amazing, because it stretches everything, starting from our obliques all the way throughout our latissimus into our triceps as well, and our rear delts. But it is amazing at helping you mobilize your spine and learn how to contract your obliques, which will be very important once we get into the rotational exercises. You can use a resistance band, a broomstick, or whatever you have to hold above your head, and try working on increasing your range of motion throughout this movement. This video is sponsored by YouTube's most important asset, you, my dear viewer. By liking this video, subscribing to this channel, and watching the whole thing, you give me motivation to make even more of those videos, but most importantly, you're keeping me from being killed in my sleep because I couldn't afford 10 meals of gourmet food every single day for my cats. You are an absolute legend. As for our low impact rotational exercise, and this will already be very beneficial for your strength production, with a beginner variation in a quadruped position, one hand right behind your head, we'll be moving through increasingly long rotations in our thoracic and lumbar spine, And most importantly, we're not just haphazardly doing those movements. No, we are actively contracting every single muscle that is involved in this movement, increasing our range of motion as much as we can, and going through this slowly in a controlled fashion, not only so we can prime our muscles for movements that include a lot of rotation, strengthening our mind-muscle connection, but also because we're using those muscles, especially in our back at the highest point, to pull us in a deeper rotation, and our core in the lowest point to once again pull us into a deeper rotation. With the more intermediate variation having us raise our knees and work from a plank position, which once again will help us not only with strength, but this time with body tension and even more with control. This moves us up a level to one exercise that stands at the very top of strength production, with a handful of other exercises, but is usually not associated with spinal mobility and spinal work, but definitely is. And that, my friends, is farmer walks or farmer carry. If you've ever tried carrying all the groceries home in one single go, then you have already done this exercise. And there is one trick that makes farmer carries even more effective, and that is having variable weights. One lighter and one heavier one, which is going to force your spine to work on stabilizing your body so you do not fall into this lateral flexion, strengthening your obliques, your spinal erectors, your entire abdominals, in fact. Adding the bonus of forearm strength, not to mention that it makes you stronger in the most important human movement pattern, which is walking. One inseparable aspect of spinal mobility, especially when it comes to flexion, is posterior chain flexibility when folding forward. And since no one really has time to stretch statically every day, we will combine this with the most effective posterior chain strength and flexibility exercise. Invented in the 17th century by Thomas Jefferson, the Jefferson curl is amazing at not only stretching out your entire posterior chain, but also strengthening your entire back by reversing this movement vertebrae by vertebrae. And while I'm sure that many of you have heard to not lift shit up from the floor with a rounded back or in this compromised back position, the Jefferson curl actually uses that to your benefit by training your back to reverse your body out of those compromised positions with safety and strength. Two crucial things to keep in mind. Start with the smallest baby amount of weight and increase with tiny increments, because this is not about moving hundreds of kilos. No, it is about learning how to move your spine with resistance, even if it is in a compromised position. And the second thing, of course, being to start with a short range of motion and to increase your range of motion slowly. Even if you do have the strength to advance faster, I would highly advise against it. Now, when it comes to better extension, it is crucial to have a lot of flexibility in your anterior chain. And there is one single exercise that not only feels absolutely amazing while working on this, but has an insane amount of core strength and overall full body strength benefits. By elevating your scapula, moving into overhead extension with your arms, and forcing your butt all the way down towards the floor, you will now be stretching your entire anterior chain, moving through your biceps, your anterior delts, your chest, your entire abdominals. As mentioned, a stretch that feels absolutely amazing. And once again, combining that with a dynamic strengthening movement instead of just statically stretching will help us become not only more efficient, but also far better at moving into this extension at will. We're now strengthening our abdominals and, most importantly, our hip flexors, which is a nice bonus because most people's hip flexors are insanely weak. You will, of course, start with very low elevation for your scapula and move your way up. The more flexible you become and the stronger you become, once again, slowly, taking care of staying injury-free. And then we move this exercise up a notch by working on thoracic extension on a wall in a tucked handstand position, strengthening our posterior chain and lengthening our anterior chain, opening up our chest and shoulders, and strengthening our arms, shoulders, and pretty much our entire body, moving all the way towards our core and our hip flexors. With this exercise moving a little bit more into the advanced category when it comes to spinal mobility and strength. And when it comes to weighted rotational exercises, you have a myriad of choices, but you have to keep one thing in mind. We need to work in multiple directions and multiple planes. That means lateral movements at shoulder height. That means diagonal movements from down to up. It also means diagonal movements from up to down. And while the cable machine is amazing at helping with that, what is even more effective, grab yourself a kettlebell, start with low weight, move slowly through tiny ranges of motion, move quickly through longer ranges of motion, change directions within the same set, and watch how your entire core becomes more mobile, stronger, and most importantly, much safer. Pick a handful of exercises, even if you do not do all of them, put them together into a single routine that you can do 2 to 3 times a week. Just 2 or 3 sets of each one of those exercises. Shouldn't take longer than 15, maybe 20 minutes if you're really slow. And if you thought I was exaggerating by how impactful this will be on your life and on your strength, just try it out for a handful of weeks so you can come back and tell me how right I was. With that said, I'll probably see you very soon. So until then, have a good one. Captain Cairo, peace out.